Something's not right with myself or the world. A chasm between me and others. I don't understand them. They don't understand me. They play a role on a stage. Life, a performance, until death. Finita la commedia.
Forget all that nonsense. Embrace absurdity. From the moment you're born, so much of your life is decided for you. Your values are dictated to you based on the culture and time in which you exist, and that same culture convinces you that the right path in life will lead to success and happiness. But what if it doesn't pan out? What if the path you've taken and the identity you've constructed per the expectations of the people around you don't feel authentic to how you see yourself? What is your life worth then? Should you still follow the script or bow out? Ingmar Bergman's 1966 film Persona is an apt exploration of this anxiety. The title of the film is the Latin word for mask, but according to 19th century psychoanalyst Carl Jung, whose writings influenced Bergman while he was making this movie, a persona is the role someone plays for the benefit of others, but also the role someone plays to satisfy their expectations of self. 3 months before the events of the film, Elisabeth Vogler, a successful actress, decides to go mute in the middle of her latest performance of Electra, a well-known figure in Greek tragedies. She goes to the hospital where she is cared for by the nurse Alma, an ordinary woman who's seemingly content with her life. She's young, engaged to her fiancé, and everything in her life appears to be progressing as it should. But perhaps therein lies the problem for her. Throughout her life, Alma's actions always seemed in conflict with how she sees herself. She goes along with whatever is happening at the moment, ready to fulfill the situation's role as necessary. Still, Alma finds joy in the pursuit of human connection and a meaningful life. For Elizabeth, however, life is a farce. Any effort for genuine connection is a sick, nihilistic joke and a desperate attempt to combat the absurdity of life. Though her refusal to speak is also a performance, she still craves authenticity in life. To escape this turmoil, however, Elizabeth sets her eyes on Alma, and when the head doctor of the hospital sends the two women to her island summer home, it is here where the egos of both women disintegrate, and the two begin to merge. Bergman injects themes of nihilism in Persona's opening sequence, as well as the rest of the film, through the inclusion of Mikhail Lermontov's 1840 novel, A Hero of Our Time, which follows the nihilistic exploits of the Russian frat boy aristocrat Grigory Alexandrovich Petchorin. While the book's appearance is brief in one note, it acts as a callback to Bergman's time spent at the Sofia Hemmet Hospital in Stockholm, Sweden. It is here that Bergman received treatment for a lung infection, as well as an ear ailment, and antibiotic poisoning. Oh my god. Not only that, but in the years prior to Bergman coming to Sofia Hemmet, he went through a bout of depression as a result of overworking himself. It's said that Bergman's dreams, as well as the sight of coffins of the deceased at the hospital's morgue, manifested themselves in some of the imagery that we see in the opening sequence. But I would also say that Bergman's dismal state, as well as the tumultuous years leading up to him writing the script for Persona, formed the basis for Elizabeth's internal suffering. And this ties us back to the inclusion of Lermontov's Hero of Our Time. Elizabeth's disillusionment with the world is best summed up by the character Petchorin when he says, "My soul has been spoiled by the world." What is that accent? "My imagination is unquiet, my heart insatiate. To me, everything is of little moment. I have become as easily accustomed to grief as to joy, and my life grows emptier day by day."
Stop it. Get some help.
The poisoning effect of the world, brought on by strife and violence, is best illustrated by the self-immolation of Thich Quang Duc, a Mahayana Buddhist monk who burnt himself alive in protest against the persecution of Buddhists under the Catholic government in South Vietnam in 1963. It makes sense that Bergman would use this moment in time to show how seemingly chaotic and meaningless the universe can be. For people to oppress one another to the point of such extreme retaliation is almost unfathomable. Bergman reinforces this feeling of disillusionment with the inclusion of the Holocaust photo later in the film. In this way, the film says to the viewer, the only way someone could bear the sheer malice of this world is by playing pretend. performing as if these events are like fleeting moments in a dream. But for Elizabeth, such a performance is reprehensible, and the only way for her to cope is to withdraw. But to withdraw itself is unsustainable, and it prevents her from understanding why people suffer in the first place. And without this understanding, she cannot forge a life that is worth living.
Som vi bär med oss. Våra svikna drömmar, den oförklarliga grymheten, ångesten inför utslocknandet, den smärtsamma insikten om vårt jordiska villkor har långsamt kristalliserat ut vår förhoppning om en utomvärldslig frälsning. Vår tros och vår tvivels oerhörda rop mot mörkret och tystnaden är ett av de ohyggligaste bevisen för vår övergivenhet och vår skrämda, outtalade vetskap. Tror du att det är så?
Elizabeth's realization that her external world is rife with so much suffering and disappointment prompts her to look inward and interrogate her purpose in this world, but she finds nothing. The inciting incident of her epiphany occurred at a party where her peers insisted that she lacked motherliness despite having everything else. She brushed this remark off at the time, but it slowly consumed her until she gave in and had a son, whom she grew to resent. Rather than being self-assured in her ability to define her worth as a woman without having children, she chooses to do something inauthentic to herself. She allows the world's expectations to creep in, and subsequently follows a script she didn't write for herself. And if she is so susceptible to the perspectives of others, what about everyone else? Elizabeth ultimately concludes that life is meaningless if we cannot find a path to genuine self-determination. Therefore, her disengagement is a form of symbolic suicide, an embrace of death, the only truth in this horrifying world, as well as her only escape. Of course, this was her only option, until she met Alma.
De bor där i sina små rum och tänk att tro på någonting så starkt att man ägnar hela sitt liv åt det. Men tro på någonting, uträtta någonting, tycka att ens liv har någon mening.
By examining Alma's perspective on life, it's clear she adopts an absurdist view, whether she is aware of it or not. Absurdism is an existentialist philosophy based around the futility of searching for meaning in a nihilistic universe. But what makes Alma's perspective absurdist is that, despite her understanding that her life seems out of her hands and doesn't seem to be going anywhere, she embraces that tension and chooses to seek out fulfillment anyway. In the myth of Sisyphus, the titular protagonist must push a massive boulder up a hill, only for the rock to roll back down once he reaches the top. He must carry out this futile task for all eternity. This myth illustrates humanity's futile efforts to find meaning in life. But what if Sisyphus's toil was what gave his life meaning? It would definitely be terrible, but what else does he have to live for? Alma's desire to find meaning in human relationships and in the simple act of living is analogous to the Sisyphean task of humans forging a meaningful life. But this is not to say that Alma's convictions go unchallenged. Her past romantic relationships were empty, and she felt unseen. And yet, she tries to get closer to Elizabeth, sharing her deepest insecurities and secrets. Because Alma feels so insignificant in her daily life, the fact that Elizabeth, this super successful, dazzling actress, gives her the time of day and allows her to share her deepest, darkest secrets with her, makes her feel as though she is being seen, that she is significant. But it's through this oversharing that the two eventually begin to merge. And this unification, I think, represents the way in which a person can reconcile the two halves of themselves. One half recognizing, as is the case with Elizabeth, that the world is inherently meaningless, while the other vies to create meaning. And as they become one, the two sides come to a better understanding of each other, driving the self to the eventual conclusion of absurdism. Elizabeth wants to adopt Alma's absurdist viewpoints and initiates the unification. In her view, perhaps that is the only valid form of authenticity, to choose life, a life with purpose in the face of death. But when Alma intercepts a letter in which Elizabeth discloses Alma's secrets to the doctor, the trust she built in Elizabeth begins to deteriorate. In other words, the boulder rolls back down the hill, and the process of embracing absurdism begins anew. The subsequent disconnect between Alma and Elizabeth illustrates the complicated process of finding meaning in this world. We can get so close to achieving happiness and a genuine connection with other people, but fall so short of grasping it. Considering how much psychoanalysis influenced Bergman, I can't help but wonder if Persona influenced Hideaki Anno's 1995 series Neon Genesis Evangelion, as well as his superb 1997 film and series finale, the end of Evangelion. Both the series and the movie demonstrate just how torturous it can be for people to be happy with themselves and desire relationships knowing full well they will be hurt, and hurt others in return. This reality creates a sense of nihilism in the series protagonist Shinji Ikari. He withdraws from the world and contemplates melding with the rest of humanity through a process called human instrumentality. Doing so would be the end of toil, sadness, insecurity, but also individuality and the ability to change for the better. So he doesn't go through with it. Instead, he chooses the absurdist notion that pushing that boulder up the hill, trying and failing to connect, is what gives life meaning. Persona suggests that absurdism is the best option we have for forging a meaningful, authentic life. We can try to escape the harsh reality that our lives might not mean much in the grand scheme of the universe by wearing a mask, or we can despair and withdraw. But what if we embraced this reality, decided not to despair, but continued living to face the world in all its hardship, perhaps even change our situation, and write our own script to make life easier for ourselves? What kind of meaning could we make then? This movie is particularly relatable to me because, as you can tell from my living conditions, life hasn't really panned out that much. But I know for my situation, I have the ability to change it. And I know that if I were to withdraw from everyone, possibly even end it all, I would be ripping apart entire networks of people that I've been able to connect with. And through those connections, I have gained some semblance of meaning in my life. I have people that care about me, and I care about them. And that's more than enough reason to keep living. But enough of that sappy nonsense. This movie is really well made. Movies made from this time period, that being the 1960s and before, tend to be unrelatable to a certain extent. The acting styles, the production end, they were all, forming and becoming better, and they were solidifying themselves into what we understand to be modern cinema. And so this movie, I think, is incredibly inventive for the time that it was made. In particular, you have the opening sequence, which establishes this sense of meta throughout the entire film. You're constantly being reminded that you are watching a movie, and in so doing, Bergman allows the audience to understand the characters in the same way that Elizabeth and Alma are trying to understand one another. And just like the starkness of every image in that opening sequence, and how it just sets the tone for everything you're going to experience. It's great. I love it. The performances in this movie are great. Bibi Andersson is what holds this movie together, and she gives a very intense performance, intense for what was expected at this time, I think, in film. And she just really brings it. And the cinematography. You can't ask for anything better than what this movie has to offer. The way Bergman introduces symbols into this film is also pretty interesting. In the scene where Alma and Elizabeth have their first falling out, Alma's eyes are obscured by her sunglasses, and the way that she's blocked in with this statue that I think is presumably the tragic figure of Elektra, the way that they're blocked together makes it seem as though Alma is arguing with the statue, which is indicative of the fact that she can't get through to Elizabeth. She can't breach that barrier of connection. It's simple, but it's top-notch stuff. Clearly, this movie influenced Robert Eggers' 2019 film, The Lighthouse. It's just as well made, but The Lighthouse, I think, deals with more issues related to toxic masculinity and how that mentality generates a sense of entitlement within men and how it can result in cycles of self-hatred. But both movies are incredibly thematically dense and fascinating in their own right. But that's all I have for today. I'm the Theme Fiend. This has been a review of Ingmar Bergman's 10 out of 10 Persona. We'll see you in the next one.